The smoke still rose from the ruins of Geneva when Admiral Kane Morrison stood before the alien commanders. His uniform was torn and dirty from 3 months of fighting. Blood stained his left sleeve from a wound that would never properly heal. Behind him, the shattered remains of Earth's once proud capital city stretched toward the horizon like broken teeth. General Vex Thakara towered over the human admiral. The Zephyrian's blue-scaled skin gleamed under the pale winter sun. His 4 arms gestured with casual arrogance as he spoke through the translation device clipped to his chest. "Your species fought well, Admiral Morrison, but fighting well and winning are different things." Kane nodded slowly. His gray eyes showed nothing but tired acceptance. "The Earth Defense Fleet surrenders unconditionally. We have no more ships to send against you, no more colonies to defend. Humanity accepts defeat." The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but Kane spoke them clearly. Around the ruined plaza, cameras captured every moment. The broadcast would reach every human settlement across the solar system. Mars would see their admiral give up. The survivors, hiding in Europa's ice cities, would watch their military commander bow his head in defeat. But Kane Morrison was not just speaking to humans. The alien coalition had insisted on broadcasting the surrender across their 12-member worlds. They wanted their own people to see how easily they had crushed the troublesome humans who had dared to resist their expansion. Captain Jake Sullivan watched the broadcast from a hidden bunker beneath what used to be New York. The concrete walls around him shook as alien patrol ships thundered overhead. 50 other resistance fighters crowded around the small screen, their faces grim in the flickering light. "That's it, then," whispered Maria Santos, Jake's second-in-command. "It's over." Jake shook his head. "No. Look at Morrison's hands." The others leaned closer. Kane's right hand hung at his side, but his fingers moved in tiny patterns. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, pause, pause. The movements looked random, but Jake had served under Kane for 6 years before the war. He knew the old man's habits. "He's sending Morse code," Jake said quietly. "Ghost protocol. Ghost protocol." Most of the fighters looked confused, but a few of the older veterans straightened up. They remembered the rumors from before the war. Whispered stories about secret projects, ships that didn't appear on any official records, bases that officially didn't exist. Commander Lisa Hayes crouched behind a pile of rubble on what used to be Europa Station. The Ice Moon's main colony was now under alien control, but Lisa and her team had escaped during the final bombardment. They lived like rats in the maintenance tunnels, stealing food and supplies from the occupying forces. Lisa had been watching the surrender broadcast on a stolen communication device. Like Jake Sullivan, she had served with Kane Morrison. Like Jake, she caught the hidden message in his finger movements. Ghost protocol meant the war wasn't over. It meant Kane Morrison was lying to the aliens on purpose. The Zephyrian coalition had good reason to celebrate their victory. In 18 months of fighting, they had destroyed over 400 human warships. The Battle of Jupiter's Rings had been a massacre, with Earth losing 60 ships in a single day. The defense of Mars had lasted only 3 weeks before the Red Planet fell to alien bombardment. Earth's colonies on Europa, Titan, and Ganymede had surrendered after their orbital defenses were smashed. The asteroid mining stations had been captured or destroyed. Every major human military installation, from Mercury to Neptune, had been reduced to glowing wreckage. General Vex Thakara had every right to feel proud. His forces had accomplished in less than 2 years what his government had predicted would take a decade. Humanity was beaten, broken, and ready to accept whatever terms the coalition chose to offer. But Vex was a careful commander. Even as he accepted Kane Morrison's surrender, part of his mind worried about loose ends. "Your fleet records show 847 ships at the start of this war," he said to Kane. "We have confirmed the destruction of 823 vessels. Where are the remaining 24 ships?" Kane met the alien general's gaze steadily. "Lost in deep space. Destroyed while trying to escape to other star systems. Some probably broke down and died in the void. When you're losing a war, Admiral, ships scatter. Not all of them make it home to die with honor. Vex studied the human admiral's face. Kane Morrison had a reputation for honesty, even among his enemies. During the war, he had kept every promise made under flags of truce. When he said prisoner exchanges would happen, they happened. When he agreed to evacuation windows for civilian transports, he honored the agreements. Very well, Vex decided. The Coalition accepts your surrender. Your remaining military personnel will be processed as prisoners of war. Your civilian population will be relocated to designated zones while we decide your species' future. Kane nodded again. Understood. May I ask one favor, General? Speak. My people are scared. They've been fighting for 18 months, and now they see their home occupied by foreign powers. If your forces could show restraint during the occupation period, it would prevent unnecessary bloodshed. Vex's scaled face showed something that might have been amusement. Admiral Morrison, your species has cost us over 2,000 ships and 50,000 lives. But you fought with honor. My soldiers have orders to treat civilians properly, as long as they offer no resistance. Thank you, General. The formal surrender ceremony lasted another hour. Kane signed documents transferring control of Earth's remaining military assets to the Coalition. He handed over command codes for defensive satellites, orbital platforms, and ground-based installations. Every piece of paper was legitimate. Every code was real, because Kane Morrison was not lying about Earth's surrender. The visible parts of humanity's military really were beaten. The ships on official records really were destroyed. The bases that appeared on government charts really had fallen to alien attack, but governments sometimes kept secrets. Military organizations sometimes had projects that existed only in classified files, and sometimes, when a species faced extinction, it prepared surprises that would not appear on any enemy's intelligence reports. As the surrender ceremony ended, and Kane was led away to a detention facility, his thoughts turned to Admiral Ben Carter. If the plan had worked, Ben and his people were still out there, still hidden, still waiting. The aliens thought they had won the war. They thought humanity was finished. They were about to learn the difference between defeating an army and conquering a species. Kane Morrison might be surrendering today, but somewhere in the darkness beyond Neptune, Earth's real military was just getting started. 6 weeks after the surrender, the first Coalition supply convoy vanished without a trace. The 12 cargo ships had been traveling from Mars to Earth, carrying construction materials for new alien military bases. They simply disappeared somewhere. Between Jupiter and the asteroid belt, General Vex Thakara studied the report with growing irritation. Navigation error? He asked his intelligence officer, a thin Krolex named Commander Zeth. Unlikely, sir. These were experienced crews using standard navigation protocols. The convoy's last transmission was routine. No distress calls, no emergency beacons. They just stopped responding. Vex frowned. Space was vast and dangerous, but 12 ships didn't just vanish. Pirates? Human resistance groups lack the ships and weapons to attack a full convoy, Zeth replied. Our occupation forces report no significant military activity from the surviving human population. 2 weeks later, another convoy disappeared. Then a third. Communication relays began going dark along the outer system routes. Scout ships sent to investigate the missing convoys never returned. What had started as isolated incidents was becoming a pattern. Commander Lisa Hayes noticed the pattern first. She was still hiding in Europa's maintenance tunnels, but her resistance cell had grown to over 200 people. They had been monitoring Coalition communications, looking for weaknesses in the occupation forces. Look at this, Lisa said to her lieutenant, Bobby Chen. She spread a star chart across the tunnel floor and marked it with red dots. Every incident happens in the same general area, between Neptune and the asteroid belt, but closer to Neptune. Bobby studied the chart. That's empty space. Nothing but ice and rock out there. Exactly. Which makes it the perfect place to hide something. Lisa had been thinking about Kane Morrison's hidden message for weeks. Ghost Protocol wasn't just a code phrase. During her years in the defense fleet, she had heard rumors about classified projects, secret shipyards, hidden bases. Most officers assumed they were just stories, but what if they weren't? What if Earth really had been building something in the outer darkness? Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the EDS Nightfall, watching, his tactical display with satisfaction. The ship was invisible to Coalition sensors, wrapped in layers of stealth technology that had taken 20 years to perfect. Around him, 47 other stealth ships waited in the shadows of Neptune's outer moons. "Convoy destroyed, sir," reported Captain Ryan Torres, recently returned from his latest mission. "All cargo ships eliminated. No survivors." Ben nodded. "Any response from Coalition forces?" "They're increasing patrols in the inner system. But they're looking in the wrong places. They always looked in the wrong places. The Coalition assumed they were dealing with desperate human survivors using captured alien technology. They couldn't imagine that Earth had spent decades preparing for this exact situation. The Shadow Fleet was humanity's greatest secret. While the public military fought its desperate battles around Jupiter and Mars, Ben's ships had waited in the deep dark. They had watched. They had learned. They had prepared for the moment when Earth's visible forces would fall. That moment had finally come. Dr. Amy Foster reviewed the test results for the 100th time. The weapon systems were performing even better than predicted. Coalition shields, designed to stop conventional human weapons, were useless against the new plasma cannons her team had developed. "The energy output is stable," she told engineer Sam Mitchell as they walked through the hidden research station. "We're getting 40% more destructive power than the old laser systems." Sam grinned. "And the quantum jump drives?" "Perfect. Our ships can move 3 times faster than anything the Coalition has. They'll never catch us in open space." The research station was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, invisible to long-range sensors. It was one of dozens of secret facilities, scattered throughout the outer system. Each one had been constructed using materials and workers that officially didn't exist. Each one had been hidden from Earth's own government, known only to a select group of military planners who understood that sometimes survival required absolute secrecy. Captain Jake Sullivan's resistance cell had grown to over 800 people. They controlled several square miles of the old New York underground, moving through subway tunnels and abandoned basements like ghosts. The aliens knew humans were hiding in the ruins, but they couldn't find them all. Jake was meeting with other resistance leaders when the message came through on their hidden communication system. The transmission was brief and heavily coded, but the meaning was clear. Phase 2 was beginning. "What's Phase 2? Asked Maria Santos. Jake smiled for the first time in months. "It means we're not alone. It means help is coming." The Coalition. Occupation forces were getting nervous. General Vex Thakara had been forced to request additional ships from the home worlds. The missing convoys were affecting supply lines. The communication blackouts were making it harder to coordinate between different sectors. "The humans are more organized than we thought," Commander Zeth reported during the morning briefing. "Intelligence suggests they have hidden weapons stockpiles and trained military units operating in the outer system." Vex studied the tactical reports. "How many ships are we talking about? A dozen? 2 dozen? "Unknown, sir. Our long-range sensors aren't detecting anything, but someone is destroying our convoys. Someone with advanced weapons and stealth capability." This was troubling news. The Coalition had accepted Earth's surrender precisely because human military capability appeared to be exhausted. If significant forces remained hidden, the occupation could become much more difficult. "Double the patrol schedules," Vex ordered. "I want search grids covering every asteroid, every moon, every piece of space debris in this system. If the humans have hidden bases, we'll find them." But the Coalition patrols found nothing. Their sensors swept through empty space, detecting only ice and rock. Their investigation teams searched abandoned mining stations and found them truly abandoned. Every lead turned into a dead end. The reason was simple. Ben Carter's people had been planning this for 20 years. They knew every Coalition sensor type. They understood every search pattern. They had built their facilities specifically to be undetectable by alien technology. More importantly, they had spent decades studying Coalition military tactics through covert observation. While Earth's official diplomats had negotiated with alien governments, Ben's intelligence agents had infiltrated Coalition space. They had learned how the enemy thought, how they fought, how they reacted to unexpected threats. The Coalition was powerful, but they were also predictable. They followed established procedures. They made logical assumptions based on past experience. They couldn't imagine an enemy that had been preparing for this exact war since before the first shots were fired. Commander Lisa Hayes received her. Orders through a hidden data packet smuggled in with routine supply drops to the refugee camps. The message told her to prepare for contact, to gather her most trusted people, to be ready for extraction within 72 hours. She stared at the message for a long time, hardly believing it was real. For months, she had lived like a hunted animal in Europa's tunnels. She had watched her friends die and her civilization crumble. She had begun to accept that humanity might really be finished, but the message was signed with codes that only came from the highest levels of Earth's military command. Someone was still out there. Someone was still fighting. Phase 2 was about to begin, and the Coalition had no idea what was coming. Admiral Ben Carter looked out at his hidden fleet and smiled grimly. 48 stealth ships were just the beginning, in bases scattered. Throughout the outer system, over 700 additional vessels waited for their moment. The largest ships were the size of small cities, armed with weapons the Coalition had never seen. Earth's visible surrender had been real, but Earth's real military had never surrendered at all. They had been waiting for this moment, when the enemy would grow overconfident and spread their forces thin across newly conquered territory. The aliens thought they had won the war. They were about to learn they had only won the opening battle. The extraction ship looked like a piece of floating debris when it docked with Europa Station's abandoned docking bay. Commander Lisa Hayes watched from the shadows as the airlock opened, and 3 figures in environmental suits stepped out. She recognized the lead figure's movements even through the bulky suit. "Captain Ryan Torres," she whispered to Bobby Chen. "I served with him on the Defender before the war." Ryan removed his helmet as soon as the airlock sealed. His face was thinner. Then Lisa remembered, marked by months of stress and combat, but his eyes were bright with purpose. "Commander Hayes," he said formally. "Admiral Carter sends his regards. Are you ready to see what we've really been building out here?" Lisa nodded, still hardly believing this was happening. "My people? The best will come with us. The others will receive new orders and better equipment. The resistance is about to become much more effective." The journey to the hidden fleet took 18 hours through routes that avoided all Coalition patrol patterns. Lisa spent most of the time getting briefed on Earth's real military situation. The truth was staggering. 837 ships, Ryan explained, as they traveled through the outer darkness. Everything from fast attack craft to massive dreadnoughts. We've been building them for 22 years, ever since first contact with the Zephyrian scouting missions. 22 years, Lisa repeated, before anyone knew there would be a war. Admiral Carter and a few others saw this coming. They knew that when humanity finally met hostile aliens, we'd need more than just our public military. So they started preparing. The fleet base was hidden inside a cluster of asteroids that looked natural on long-range scans. Up close, Lisa could see the truth. The asteroids had been hollowed out and connected by massive tunnels. Docking bays large enough for battleships stretched deep into the rock. Manufacturing facilities produced everything from ammunition to complete starship engines. Admiral Ben Carter met them at the main docking port. He was older than Lisa expected, probably in his 70s, but his handshake was firm and his voice was strong. "Commander Hayes, I've read your reports from the Europa Resistance. Impressive work keeping your people alive under impossible conditions." "Thank you, sir. But I have to ask, if we had this fleet all along, why did we let Earth fall? Why did we surrender?" Ben's expression grew serious. "Because we needed the coalition to believe they had won. We needed them to spread their forces across our conquered territory. We needed them to become overconfident and careless. If they had known about the Shadow Fleet from the beginning, they would have brought their entire military to crush us. This way, we fight them on our terms." Lisa followed Ben through the hidden base, amazed by what she saw. Thousands of personnel moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency. Command centers buzzed with activity as officers planned operations across the solar system. In the manufacturing sectors, new ships were taking shape under the hands of skilled workers. "How many people know about this?" she asked. "About 50,000 in the fleet itself, another 100,000 in supporting facilities. All volunteers who officially died during the war. As far as the coalition knows, these people don't exist." Dr. Amy Foster showed Lisa through the weapons research division. The new plasma cannons were impressive, but they were only part of the story. Amy's team had developed quantum torpedoes that could phase through coalition shields. They had created sensor jammers that could hide entire fleets. Most importantly, they had built quantum communication systems that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. "The coalition thinks in terms of traditional space warfare," Amy explained. "They use weapons and tactics that worked in their last war 50 years ago. But we've been studying them specifically. Every weapon we build is designed to counter their technology." Engineer Sam Mitchell took Lisa through the shipyards where the massive dreadnoughts were being completed. Each ship was over 2 miles long, armed with weapons that could destroy a city and protected by shields that could deflect asteroid impacts. "The quantum jump drives are the real game changer," Sam said proudly. "Our ships can cross the solar system in hours instead of weeks. We can hit the enemy anywhere and be gone before they respond. But the most impressive part wasn't the technology, it was the people." Lisa met former Defense Fleet officers who had officially died at the Battle of Jupiter's Rings. She saw engineers who had supposedly been killed when Mars fell. Entire crews of dead personnel were training on simulators, preparing for the missions that would change everything. "We couldn't save everyone," Ben explained as they toured a memorial wall listing the names of those who had truly died. 2. Many good people were lost in the public war. But every death bought us time to prepare. Every defeat made the coalition more confident that they had beaten us completely. Captain Jake Sullivan arrived at the base 2 days later with 50 of his best resistance fighters. The underground war in New York had prepared them well for covert operations, but seeing the hidden fleet was overwhelming. "This whole time," Jake said to Lisa as they watched new ships launch from the hidden shipyards, "while we were scrounging for food and ammunition, Earth had this waiting in the dark." "Not Earth," Lisa corrected. "A few people who saw what was coming and made hard choices. They let millions of us suffer to protect this secret." Jake nodded slowly. "And now? Now we make it worth it." Admiral Ben Carter called a full briefing for all senior officers. The main command center could hold over 1,000 people, and every seat was filled. Lisa recognized some faces from the old defense fleet, but many others were new to her. These were people who had spent years in the shadows, preparing for a war the rest of humanity hadn't known was coming. "Operation Phoenix begins in 72 hours," Ben announced. "Simultaneous strikes on coalition forces at Mars, Europa, Titan, and Earth orbit. Our objectives are to liberate prisoner facilities, destroy enemy supply bases, and demonstrate that humanity is far from defeated." The tactical displays showed the scope of the operation. Over 200 ships would participate in the coordinated assault. Each strike force had specific targets and detailed intelligence about enemy positions. Nothing was left to chance. "The Coalition has approximately 400 ships in our system," continued Admiral Carter. "They're scattered across our former colonies, confident that they face no significant threat. We're going to prove them wrong." Commander Lisa Hayes found herself assigned to lead the ground assault on Europa Station. It felt appropriate, returning to liberate the place where she had spent months hiding from the occupiers. "Your job is to coordinate with local resistance groups and secure the prisoner compounds," Ryan Torres explained during her mission briefing. "Intelligence indicates they're holding over 3,000 Defense Fleet personnel there." "Including Admiral Kane Morrison?" Lisa asked. "Especially Admiral Kane Morrison. Getting him back will send a message to both our people and the Coalition." The final preparations moved with practiced efficiency. Ships that had hidden in the dark for months began moving into attack positions. Weapons systems that had been tested only in simulation charged up for real combat. Personnel who had trained endlessly for this moment prepared for their first taste of actual warfare. Dr. Amy Foster ran final checks on the new quantum torpedoes. Engineer Sam Mitchell supervised the loading of the massive plasma cannons. Throughout the hidden fleet, thousands of people made ready for the moment that would announce to the galaxy that humanity refused to stay defeated. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of his flagship, the EDS Retribution, and looked out at the fleet, arrayed around him. Ships that officially didn't exist, crewed by people who were supposed to be dead, armed with weapons the enemy had never seen. "All ships report ready, sir," his tactical officer announced. Ben nodded. For 22 years, he had prepared for this moment. For months, he had watched the Coalition occupy human territory and abuse human civilians. For too long, Earth's children had suffered under alien rule. "Signal all units," he commanded. "Operation Phoenix is authorized. Time to remind the galaxy what happens when you underestimate humanity." The first Coalition patrol ship to detect the Shadow Fleet never had a chance to send a warning. Captain Ryan Torres watched from the bridge of his stealth cruiser as the quantum torpedoes passed right through the alien vessel's shields. The enemy ship simply came apart, its hull splitting like paper under the assault of weapons designed specifically to counter Coalition defenses. "Target destroyed," reported his weapons officer. "No distress signal transmitted." "Good. Move to the next patrol point." Across the solar system, similar scenes played out as Earth's hidden fleet emerged from 22 years of concealment. Ships that had existed only in classified files suddenly appeared on Coalition sensors, moving faster than anything the aliens had seen before. General Vex Thakara was reviewing occupation reports when the first emergency alerts reached his command center. His communications officer, a young Zephyrian named Sub-Commander Thek, looked confused as he tried to make sense of the incoming data. "Sir, we're receiving distress calls from multiple sectors. Ships are reporting contact with unknown human vessels." Vex frowned. "Unknown human vessels? We destroyed their entire fleet months ago." "The reports are consistent, sir. Large human warships with advanced weapons and stealth capability. Our patrols are being systematically destroyed." Before Vex could respond, the tactical display lit up with new contacts. Dozens of ships were appearing throughout the system, moving in coordinated attack formations. The computer identified them as human designs, but they were larger and more advanced than anything in Earth's previous military records. "That's impossible," Vex whispered, staring at the display. "Where did they come from?" Admiral Kane Morrison felt the explosion that shattered his prison transport's escort ships. He was being moved from Europa to a new detention facility on Ibobani, Mars, when the Shadow Fleet struck the convoy. Through the small porthole in his cell, he could see human warships engaging the Coalition guards. The ships were beautiful. Clean lines and elegant curves marked them as definitely human in origin, but they moved with a grace and speed that Earth's old fleet had never possessed. Their weapons struck with devastating precision, turning alien warships into expanding clouds of debris. Kane smiled for the first time since his surrender. Ben Carter had done it. The crazy old planner had actually pulled it off. The transport ship shuddered as docking clamps engaged with its hull. Kane heard the sound of cutting, torches working on the outer airlock. Within minutes, the prison bay door slid open and familiar faces appeared. "Admiral Morrison," said Commander Lisa Hayes, her voice tight with emotion. "Permission to come aboard, sir." "Permission granted, Commander. I take it the war isn't over after all?" "No, sir. It's just getting started. The liberation of the prisoner." Compounds went smoothly. Coalition guards, expecting to deal with desperate refugees and resistance fighters, found themselves facing disciplined military units with superior equipment. The aliens surrendered quickly when faced with quantum weapons that could cut through their battle armor like it was made of cloth. Kane was briefed on the Shadow Fleet's capabilities during his transport to the main base. The numbers were staggering. Not just the ships, but the planning that had gone into keeping them secret for over 2 decades. "How many people knew?" he asked Lisa as they reviewed tactical displays. "Maybe 100 at the very top. Everyone else was compartmentalized. Workers thought they were building mining equipment. Transport crews thought they were moving industrial. Supplies. Even most of the ship crews didn't know the full scope until just before the operation began. And Ben Carter coordinated all of this? Admiral Carter and a planning group that included some names you'd recognize. People who saw this war coming before first contact was even made public. The Battle of Mars was the first major fleet engagement between the Shadow Fleet and Coalition forces. Admiral Ben Carter commanded from the Retribution, his massive dreadnought leading a task force of 60 ships against a Coalition fleet of similar size. The enemy commander, a veteran Krolex admiral, named Shek Vorthak, had fought in a dozen previous campaigns. He was confident in his ships and crews, certain that human technology couldn't match Coalition military engineering. He was wrong. The human ships moved like dancers, using their quantum jump drives to appear and disappear across the battlefield. Their weapons cut through Coalition shields as if they didn't exist. Worse still, they seemed to know exactly where every enemy ship would be before it got there. "How are they predicting our movements?" Vorthak demanded as another of his cruisers vanished in a ball of plasma fire. "Unknown, sir," his tactical officer replied. "Their targeting computers seem to anticipate our evasive maneuvers." What Vorthak didn't know was that the Shadow Fleet had been studying Coalition tactics for years. Every engagement, every training exercise, every patrol pattern had been observed and analyzed. Dr. Amy Foster's computers could predict Coalition fleet movements with 90% accuracy. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the Coalition fleet had been completely destroyed while the Shadow Fleet had lost only 3 ships. Mars was back in human hands for the first time since the surrender. Engineer Sam Mitchell supervised the activation of Earth's hidden orbital defenses as the Shadow Fleet moved to liberate humanity's homeworld. The weapons platforms had been built into seemingly harmless communications satellites and orbital debris. When they powered up, Earth suddenly bristled with more defensive firepower than it had ever possessed during the original war. Coalition. Ships in Earth orbit found themselves trapped between the ascending Shadow Fleet and the revealed orbital weapons. General Vex Thakara, commanding from his flagship in high orbit, watched his occupation force dissolve under the combined assault. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet," reported Sub-Commander Thek. "Put it through." Admiral Kane Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. He looked older and more tired than during his surrender, but his eyes burned with determination. "General Vex, I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss." Vex stared at the human admiral in shock. "You're supposed to be in a detention facility." "I was. Your security wasn't as good as you thought." Kane's expression grew hard. "I'm calling on you to surrender your forces and withdraw from human space. This is your only warning." "Impossible," Vex snarled. "You have maybe 100 ships. My government will send 1,000 to crush you. Kane smiled grimly. General, you're looking at less than a quarter of Earth's real military strength. Did you really think we'd show you everything in the first battle? The tactical display behind, Kane showed the true scope of the Shadow Fleet. Over 700 ships were scattered throughout the system, with more arriving from hidden bases every hour. Massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever built moved through space like metal mountains. This is impossible, Vex repeated, but his voice had lost its confidence. Where did you build all of this? Our intelligence monitored your entire industrial capacity. You monitored our public industrial capacity, Kane corrected. We've been preparing for this war since before your people made first contact. Every resource we claim to use for peaceful purposes. Every mining operation in the asteroid belt. Every research station in the outer system. All of it was building toward this moment. Captain Jake Sullivan led the ground assault that liberated New York. His resistance fighters, now equipped with Shadow Fleet weapons and armor, moved through the city like an unstoppable force. Coalition troops, trained for occupation duty rather than urban warfare against motivated defenders, collapsed under the assault. Jake stood in Times Square, looking up at the human flag flying above the ruins for the first time in months. Around him, civilians emerged from hiding places to cheer the liberation forces. "It's really over?" asked Maria Santos, still hardly believing what they had accomplished. "The occupation's over," Jake confirmed. "But the war's just getting started. We've got a galaxy full of species that need to learn some respect for humanity." In bases throughout the outer system, more Shadow Fleet ships continued launching. The dreadnoughts were the most impressive, but there were also fast attack craft, stealth reconnaissance vessels, mobile supply platforms, and specialized ships designed for missions the Coalition couldn't even imagine. Dr. Amy Foster watched the deployment from her research station, proud of the weapon systems that were performing even better than projected, but she was already thinking ahead to the next phase. The Coalition would respond with massive force once they understood the true scope of Earth's capabilities. "We need to hit their home systems," she told Sam Mitchell as they reviewed intelligence reports. "Show them that nowhere is safe if they want to fight humanity." Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as Coalition forces throughout the solar system either surrendered or fled toward deep space. Operation Phoenix had exceeded all expectations. Human territory was liberated, prisoners were free, and the galaxy was about to learn that Earth's surrender had been the greatest deception in military history. "All major objectives secured, sir," reported his tactical officer. "Coalition resistance is collapsing on all fronts." "Good. Signal all ships to begin Phase 2 operations. It's time to take this war to the enemy's home ground." Ben looked out at the fleet that had waited so long in the darkness. Ships crewed by heroes who had officially died months ago. Weapons designed by scientists who supposedly didn't exist. A military force that had been 22 years in the making. The aliens had thought they won the war when they accepted Earth's surrender. They were about to discover they had only awakened humanity's true strength. The Zephyrian homeworld of Kethvar had not seen enemy warships in its skies for over 300 years. When the Shadow Fleet emerged from Quantum Jump near the planet's outer moons, panic spread through the civilian population faster than official news broadcasts could calm them. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as his fleet took positions around the heavily defended world. Orbital defense platforms bristled with weapons, but they had been designed to fight conventional space battles. They were not prepared for human ships that could phase in and out of normal space at will. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planetary government," reported his communications officer. "Put it through." The face that appeared on the main screen belonged to Premier Vex Kethmar, the Zephyrian leader whose government had authorized the invasion of human space. The alien's blue-scaled features showed barely controlled fear as he stared at the human fleet arrayed above his world. I am Premier Kethmar. By what right do human warships threaten a peaceful world? Ben's expression was cold as winter vacuum. By the same right your forces used to occupy Earth, Premier. The right of superior military strength. This is an act of unprovoked aggression. The Galactic Council will condemn this invasion. The Galactic Council sat silent when your coalition attacked humanity. They watched while you enslaved our people and destroyed our cities. Now they can watch while we demonstrate the consequences of underestimating Earth. The truth was that Ben had no intention of destroying Kethvar or its population, but the Zephyrians didn't know that. They saw human ships surrounding their world and remembered the stories their own forces had told about humanity's stubborn resistance. "What do you want?" Kethmar asked, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Complete withdrawal of all coalition forces from human space. Reparations for the damage caused during your occupation, and a formal guarantee that no coalition species will ever again threaten human territory." Impossible. The Coalition Council would never agree to such terms. Ben smiled grimly. "Then I suppose we'll have to discuss this with each member world individually." The demonstration that followed was carefully calculated for maximum psychological impact. Human ships used their quantum weapons to precisely destroy military targets across Kethvar's orbital space. Defense platforms that had stood guard for centuries vanished in bursts of directed plasma. Orbital shipyards where coalition warships were built simply ceased to exist. Not a single civilian target was touched. Not one non-military facility was damaged. But the message was clear. Humanity could strike anywhere, anytime, with weapons. The coalition couldn't stop. Captain Ryan Torres led a smaller task force to the Krolex home system while the main fleet demonstrated at Kethvar. The Krolex had provided much of the coalition's tactical planning during the invasion of human space. It seemed appropriate that they should be the second to receive Earth's personal attention. The Krolex commander who met them, Admiral Zrek Thokol, was more pragmatic than his Zephyrian counterpart. "Your species has developed impressive military capabilities," he admitted over the communication channel. "Perhaps we underestimated humanity's potential." "Perhaps you did," Ryan agreed. "The question now is whether your government is wise enough to learn from that mistake." What would constitute an acceptable resolution to this conflict? Ryan outlined the same terms Ben had offered the Zephyrians: complete withdrawal, reparations, and guarantees of future non-interference. He also added a new element that the tactical staff had been discussing. "We're also going to need access to coalition star charts and navigation data for the region. Humanity is expanding beyond our home system, and we want to make sure we don't accidentally settle on worlds that other species consider important." This was actually the most significant demand, though the Krolex didn't realize it. Human expansion had always been limited by lack of knowledge about nearby star systems. With coalition navigation data, Earth's exploration fleets could identify suitable worlds for colonization across hundreds of light years. Admiral Kane Morrison led the diplomatic mission to the Thakari worlds, the species that had provided much of the coalition's ground forces during the occupation. His reputation for honor during the war worked in his favor. The Thakari remembered him as an opponent who had kept his word even when losing. "Admiral Morrison," greeted war leader Thak Revan, the Thakari military commander. "I had heard you were dead." Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated, as were reports of humanity's defeat. "So it would seem. Your shadow fleet is quite impressive. Our intelligence services are very curious about how you managed to hide such a large military force," Kane smiled. "Trade secret. But I'm sure our governments can work out some kind of technology sharing agreement as part of the peace settlement." This was another carefully calculated offer. Humanity didn't need to share their stealth technology or quantum weapons, but they could offer improvements to coalition agriculture, manufacturing, and space travel. The carrot to go with the stick of military superiority. Commander Lisa Hayes found herself commanding a task force at the Velox home system, the species that had provided the coalition with their fastest scout ships. The Velox were known for being quick to recognize changing circumstances and adapt accordingly. "Commander Hayes," transmitted the Velox fleet leader, a being whose name translated roughly as Swift Current Dancer. "Your ships are even faster than our own. Most impressive. Thank you. I hope we can resolve this situation without further demonstrations of our capabilities." Indeed, the Velox have always believed that wisdom lies in recognizing superior force and adapting to new realities. What terms would humanity consider reasonable? Lisa was pleased but not surprised by the quick capitulation. The Velox had joined the coalition primarily for access to better technology and trade opportunities. If humanity could offer better deals, they would switch sides without hesitation. Dr. Amy Foster monitored the negotiations from her research station, analyzing intelligence reports from the human task forces scattered across coalition space. The psychological warfare was working exactly as planned. Each species was being forced to confront the reality that humanity possessed overwhelming military superiority. "The hegemony worlds are requesting a separate peace," she reported to engineer Sam Mitchell. "They're claiming they were coerced into joining the coalition." "Probably true," Sam replied. "Most of these species joined because they were afraid of Zephyrian expansion. Now they're more afraid of human expansion. Are we actually planning to expand aggressively?" Sam grinned. "That's the beauty of it. We don't have to actually be aggressive. We just have to be capable of aggression. The threat is more effective than the action." Captain Jake Sullivan commanded a special operations team that struck at coalition intelligence facilities throughout their territory. These were precision raids designed to capture data rather than destroy targets. Humanity wanted to understand the full scope of coalition capabilities and potential threats from other galactic powers. "Intelligence haul from the Nexus facility is enormous," Jake reported to Admiral Ben Carter during a secure communication session. "They've been monitoring over 40 different species, including some that aren't even aware of galactic civilization yet. Any immediate threats to humanity? Nothing we can't handle with current force levels. But there are some interesting opportunities. Several species that were conquered by the coalition are ready to revolt if they think they have backing. Liberation movements? Exactly. We could end up with a dozen new allies just by helping them throw off coalition rule." The domino effect was exactly what Ben had hoped for. By demonstrating overwhelming superiority over the coalition, humanity was positioning itself as the dominant military power in the local region of the galaxy. Species that had been enemies or neutral parties were suddenly very interested in becoming Earth's friends. General Vex Thakara, who had accepted humanity's surrender just months earlier, now found himself prisoner aboard a human ship. The irony was not lost on him as he was escorted to a meeting with Admiral Kane Morrison. "Admiral," Vex said formally, "I must commend you on a masterful deception. I have never been so thoroughly outmaneuvered." Kane nodded respectfully. "Thank you, General. You fought honorably during the war. Your conduct toward our civilians during the occupation was also noted and appreciated. What happens now? That depends on your government's response to our terms. If they're reasonable, you'll be returned to your people with full honors. If they're stubborn, you might be our guest for a considerably longer time." Vex studied the human admiral's face. "You never intended to actually surrender, did you? The entire thing was a trap." "We surrendered exactly what we said we were surrendering. Our public military forces really were defeated. Our visible colonies really did fall under your control. We just never mentioned the forces you couldn't see." 22 years of preparation," Vex said wonderingly. "Your species began planning this war before we even made official contact." "General, your people have been expanding through this region for over a century. Every species you've conquered or absorbed has left refugees and survivors. Some of those survivors made it to human space and told us what was coming. We had two choices: wait for you to attack us unprepared or prepare for the inevitable conflict. And you chose to prepare. We chose to survive." The final phase of Operation Phoenix came when representatives from all 12 coalition species met in neutral space to negotiate the peace settlement. The meeting was held aboard a massive human diplomatic ship that was itself a demonstration of Earth's industrial capabilities. Admiral Ben Carter presided over the negotiations personally, flanked by Admiral Kane Morrison and a team of Earth's best diplomatic and military minds. The coalition delegation looked appropriately subdued as they took their seats around the conference table. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various other classifications," Ben began formally, "we're here to discuss the terms under which humanity will accept your surrender." Premier Kethmar bristled at the phrasing. "This is a negotiation, not a surrender ceremony. Premier, your fleets are scattered, your homeworlds are under human observation, and your military capability has been demonstrated to be inferior to ours in every meaningful way. You can call it whatever makes you comfortable, but the reality is that you lost this war the moment you underestimated humanity." The terms were generous, considering humanity's overwhelming military advantage. Complete withdrawal from human space, reparations paid in technology and resources rather than currency, and mutual non-aggression pacts. In exchange, humanity offered trade agreements, technology sharing in non-military areas, and protection from other galactic threats. "You could simply conquer us all," observed Admiral Zrek Thokol of the Krolex. "Why offer these terms instead?" Kane answered for the human delegation. "Because conquest creates enemies. Partnership creates allies. We'd rather have you as friends than subjects." The negotiations took 3 days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The coalition had no choice but to accept human terms. Their alternative was continued warfare against an opponent who had already proven they could strike anywhere with impunity. 6 months after the Shadow Fleet's revelation, Admiral Ben Carter stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest space station, watching as former coalition ships worked alongside human vessels to establish joint patrol routes. The galaxy had changed dramatically in those 6 months. Humanity was now recognized as the dominant military power in their region of space. Former coalition worlds were eagerly seeking trade agreements and defense partnerships with Earth. Species that had never heard of humans were sending diplomatic missions to establish relations with the mysterious newcomers who had appeared from nowhere to reshape galactic politics. "Any regrets about keeping the fleet secret for so long?" asked Commander Lisa Hayes, who had been promoted to admiral and placed in charge of diplomatic relations. Ben considered the question carefully. "Regrets about the necessity, yes. Regrets about the decision, no. If we had revealed our capabilities earlier, the coalition would have brought overwhelming force to crush us before we were ready. Sometimes deception is the only path to survival, and now humanity takes its place among the galactic powers. We're no longer a species that can be conquered or ignored. The galaxy will have to deal with us as equals." Through the station's viewports, Earth gleamed blue and beautiful in the distance. The home world that had appeared defeated and helpless just months earlier was now the center of a growing interstellar alliance. Humanity had learned the greatest lesson of interstellar warfare. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to let your enemy think they've already won. The aliens had celebrated their victory over humanity. They had divided up human territory and planned for decades of occupation. They had assumed that Earth's surrender meant humanity was finished as a galactic power. They had been wrong. And now the entire galaxy knew that underestimating humanity was the kind of mistake you only made once.